You finally found where your ancestor is buried. Now, you could find yourself standing in the middle of a cornfield, you could find yourself in the middle of a church cemetery, or in the middle of a large city cemetery. Make sure before you leave that cemetery and before you finish your day of research that you have asked yourself the most important question for your family history research that day. Hey guys, if we haven't met, I am Lisa. I'm a genealogy researcher and author, and this YouTube channel is here to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, and not get overwhelmed in the process. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you're in the right place. We're back in the cemetery and you have found your ancestor's gravesite. You have transcribed all the information from that tombstone. You've taken all the photographs that you need to take. But your work is not done yet. Step back, look around you, and ask yourself this most important question. Why? Why this gravesite? Why is your ancestor buried in this particular gravesite? In this particular cemetery? And why is this cemetery here? Why is the most important question that you can ask yourself when you are doing cemetery research. And why is that? While the location of your ancestor's grave may seem random, it was not. There is a reason that your ancestor was buried in this location, and it is your job as a genealogy researcher, a family historian, to find out why. So what does the answer to these questions, these why questions, what does this have to do with your family history research, and why should you care? Because understanding more about the location of your ancestor and where they were buried will provide you new avenues of research. And as genealogy researchers, as we are trying to extend that ancestor line back, sometimes we need new clues. And we don't want to miss them simply because we failed to understand our ancestor's life. Now, if you enjoy exploring old cemeteries for your ancestors like I do, be sure and hit that like button and let me know. So let me walk you through what asking that why question in the cemetery actually looks like. Now, if you find yourself standing at your ancestor's gravesite and you are in the middle of a church cemetery, then you might want to consider that your ancestor was a church member or the family was a member of that church. And you want to add church records to your research plan. But take this one step further in that church cemetery. Look around. Do any of those grave sites actually predate the existence of the church? If so, consider that that church cemetery may have started out as a different type of cemetery. In the case of my great-great-great-grandfather, it turned out when I found him in the church cemetery, I missed the fact up front that his gravesite predated the church. And as it turned out, he was buried there when that cemetery was simply a family cemetery. This was the land that the family owned. This was where their family cemetery was situated. And this was part of the land that was donated to the church to have the church built there. And the church cemetery grew up around the family cemetery. So by understanding that my ancestor was buried in what was originally a family cemetery, I went looking for deed records. Did you find your ancestor's burial site in a large city or town cemetery? Now, it's possible that the reason they are there is because it was simply the normal tradition of what people did for that area. But consider their location within that cemetery. Why are they in that particular location? Is it a family plot? If so, you're likely to find other related ancestors there as well. Are they in the military section of that particular cemetery? Then you want to add military records to your genealogy research plan as well. Did you find your ancestor's grave in a rural wooded area or in the middle of a tobacco field? It's a really good chance that that was a family cemetery and that was perhaps the land that the family owned. So if that's the case, then definitely you want to add the deed records to your genealogy research plan as well. So asking yourself the question, why? When you answer that question, you will be able to start adding to your research plan. You can add deed records, church records, military records. You can find clues to provide you with new avenues of research for your genealogy research plan to help you build out your family tree and extend it further back. If you want to learn more about researching your ancestors in the cemetery, Watch this video, the 7 steps to successful genealogy research in the cemetery, to make sure you're getting the most out of your cemetery research and not missing out on important clues.